Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, and I'm joined by my co-host, Karmel.
What is up?
Today in studio, I'm very excited to have our first special guest of Season 2. We are joined by Dr. Thomas Parham. He is a professor and executive director of screenwriting and curricular development for the Department of Cinematic Arts at Azusa Pacific University, my alma mater. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and spent 7 years in active duty, during which he qualified as a surface warfare officer. Tom then left the Navy to complete a doctorate in communication studies at Regent University. He's a member of the Writers Guild of America and has written for the long-running CBS drama JAG and the Family Channel sitcom Big Brother Jake, and also served as an on-location writer's assistant for the 3rd season of Touched by an Angel. Wow. Dr. Parham, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for coming through.
Thanks, Malynda, for having me.
Of course. I haven't seen you in forever. We're not going to say how long.
Seriously.
But yes, Tom is a former professor at APU, and we worked together, and he also played my father in my senior show.
That's why when you talked about how bold and brash you were, you didn't ask if I would play your father.
Oh, no.
You said, and you can be my dad.
Look, I didn't have many choices.
Exactly.
So I was like, Tom, hey, you sing, you act, let's do this. You're a professor. And he was great. And we had a great time. And I still watch that sometimes. I'm really proud of it. So thanks for being a part, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. We're going to have a discussion that I think is really, really important, specifically being someone who is very open about her faith in the entertainment industry. And I want to talk about the connection between religion and the entertainment industry. And as we know, the entertainment industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it has the ability to influence and affect nearly every facet of our lives, and it can really shape what our standards are on a day-to-day basis, both negatively and positively. And I think with how religion and beliefs can get portrayed in the industry, whether it's by the media or in TV and film, that can essentially taint our views of other people's religions and cultures. So one of the first questions I want to ask you guys is, do you think that Hollywood has an issue with portraying religion and beliefs correctly? And do you think that does play into how people in the real world respond to those religions and beliefs?
I think part of the problem is a lot of people in the industry don't know a lot of people who are actively practicing their faith. My friend Dean Batali, who was showrunner on The Good Witch for the last 2 seasons and was also the final showrunner on that 70s show, but several years ago, he said, Christians are the new gays on TV. Everybody wants to play one, but nobody wants to be one.
Oh, wow.
But people just don't know. It's always been, people like to say America's a Christian nation. And no, it's not. People claim, George Barna his organization does polls on a routine basis about Americans' religious practices. And when you ask how many people believe in God, that number is really high, like 85, 90%. Yeah. But when you start asking very specific questions about, do you attend church regularly? Do you tithe? Do you have daily devotionals? Do you have Bible study on a regular basis? That number goes way down.
For sure.
And in Hollywood, a lot of people just, for whatever reasons, I would argue that America is a post-Christian culture. And it used to be, there's the great line from Indiana Jones, which was released in, I think, 1981. But when he's talking about the Ark of the Covenant, he turns to the government agents and said, didn't you guys ever go to Sunday school? And they're like, that's more normal than not these days. Right. People just don't go to church like they used to.
Yeah.
And, the demographics have shifted. And it's interesting because being African American, it's not unexpected that I have religious beliefs.
Right.
But it seems almost strange when Anglos, because African Americans and Latinos, it's kind of expected that they might have some kind of religious belief.
Right.
But for Caucasian Americans, not so much.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Because I agree with you. I agree with you. Most minorities, I feel like, have some sort of basis in the church, but I do agree, but I wonder why that is.
I think part of it is this whole notion of the American dream, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, being a self-made man, is very non-God dependent. And whereas when I had a really interesting discussion with a good friend who's Jewish about a year and a half ago, and we were supposed to talk about something else, and then she just asked, why are you a Christian? And I explained to her, well, my late father was a career naval chaplain, and then historically African Americans were brought over here against their will, and spiritual practices, church, faith gave them a raison d'etre and a hope for a life after this one. I think that because Anglos have been the dominant culture in American society for so long, and there's been institutional drift as the government started taking care of things that church traditionally did, taking care of the poor, feeding the hungry, etc., that as people started pursuing the American dream and money, that church became something that went on the back burner. And then when you couple that with the different revolutions in society, whether it's women's lib, etc., that it just became kind of an afterthought. So I'm always fast. I have Anglo friends who, Karen Hall, who's a veteran screenwriter, she wrote for MASH back in the day, and her younger sister Barbara is showrunner of Madam Secretary and creative Joan of Arcadia before that. But after 9/11, younger sister calls big sister and says, "Start talking." And Karen tapped in, basically tagged in a friend to better mentor her sister spiritually. But that seems to be the exception more than the rule.
Interesting.
I feel like a lot of, especially with minorities, like Black culture, Latino culture, us being in church on a regular basis is part of like us being a minority. Like we're downtrodden, so naturally we have to find a place to go and find, like you said, our hope for something better, and we kind of look to an Anglo God in a sense. So then when that God has to go to church, it doesn't make sense. Like you should need church like we need it. So it's kind of weird when you get out of that aspect and see regular folks having to go to church and like needing the same kind of stuff we need. It kind of lowers them a little bit. So I think a lot of in the white culture, church is ceremonial. It's just like holidays, Easter and Christmas, and that's
Christmas and
basically
Easter.
it. And that's it. And then you see the big push on TV is a Hallmark Channel has like 1,000 Christmas shows and Easter shows. So that's all we see for religion. So then when we see things written in other times during TV season, that's not at all what that religion is. It's completely based on these two holidays, and that's really about it.
Right.
They don't have any like other layer than that. So I think that's why I see that a lot in entertainment, that they don't really know what they're talking about because they don't go.
Well, I was going to hit on a little bit of a point, which I find it interesting that it seems that, white Americans probably aren't as much Christians as you were saying, even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, weren't white people the ones that brought Christianity to other cultures and other races?
And they still do.
And they're the ones that are kind of straying away from it.
Well, it's funny that Korea is sending missionaries to the U.S.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, and it's interesting because Malynda and I met when she was a student at Azusa Pacific. So obviously, the demography of APU has changed in the 18 years I've been there. Where it used to be majority white, it is now majority non-white.
Wow.
Which is fascinating because that shift has happened in like the last 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, it started with the freshman class that was majority minority, and then it kept going. So it's kind of interesting to see because cinema, when I got there, was very Anglo, and now it's got a nice representation. It was also very male, and now we have a lot of women, which is great. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are. When I was chair, we were right approaching parity. It was like 47-53, so women were almost about half, which is interesting because overall at colleges nationwide, the split is 2-to-1 female to male. In fact, this generation of students is the first one predicted that the women will out-earn their men because the guys aren't going to school.
They're not going, right?
And a bachelor's degree does, in the long run, increase your earning potential.
Sure.
I think that's also kind of the sign of the times, though. Women and minorities are becoming more at the forefront in everything in our society.
Hallelujah.
You're right.
Finally,
It's
right?
finally a time for a change with that. So that's really cool to see that at APU because it definitely was not the situation when I was there.
Well, one thing I love is the fact that when women are showrunners and executive producers on television shows, that writer's room, that cast is almost automatically going to be diverse.
Yes.
Whereas when it's white guys, not so much.
Yeah.
So, as a writer, how have you had to write about religions that you were never exposed to, and how have you noticed that other writers have approached those types of situations?
Having a PhD means I know how to do research. So when I'm, if I were to write about different religions than the one I practice, I do research. I had great conversations my sophomore summer at the Naval Academy. A good friend of mine is Catholic, And we just sat for an evening and talked about, okay, so what do y'all believe and what do you don't believe? You know, we don't pray to the saints, we pray through the saints. You know, if you have a good friend, wouldn't you want them to pray for you? That's how it is. And because there's a lot of weird Protestants, there's a lot of anti-Catholic bias, which annoys me because I have some very dear friends who are born again, committed Christians, and they're Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of the university where I used to teach does not have Catholic professors, and I don't think they have Catholic students, and that's weird to me. APU is very Catholic friendly. One of our faculty senate moderators, Trish Haynes, she just retired nursing prof, but she's Catholic, and one faculty workshop, she actually explained the rosary to the faculty, because even though APU is known as Protestant evangelical, we have a wide swath of religious traditions. Which is kind of cool.
And I've been associated with different Catholic schools and churches through a myriad of different things, and I've always felt like being brought up in a Baptist church, and always had this weird thing against Catholicism. When I was there, I felt comfortable, and I felt like, why is this a problem? Like I enjoy the community here, I like what they're doing. Now there's some things I didn't understand or didn't get, but for the most part, I felt comfortable. And I didn't understand why, when I got back to my Baptist church or even a non-denominational church, there was this bias against Catholicism. So it's weird, as you say, that there's a school you went to that didn't have any Catholicism or any Catholic preachers or teachers or professors, but it's Christian. It's still Christian, regardless of being Catholicism or Protestant. It's still Christian. And why we don't have the whole other sector that's as big as the one we profess?
Yeah, I think part of it is just that people fear what they don't know, what they don't understand.
Absolutely.
And one of the interesting things is our students come from a wide variety of traditions. And it's fascinating, especially some of the homeschool kids where you can tell, or the kids who went to majority white high schools and now they're in a multi-ethnic environment. So it makes for interesting discussions in class. Sure. I'm teaching ethics and cinematic arts this semester, have a really great class, and we had a great discussion yesterday about a wide variety of subjects. But I think it's really important that if you're not aware of a specific religion, whether it's Mormonism, whether it's Judaism, etc., do your research. And if you have a friend, ask them.
I think that's the main issue, just in general, being exposed to people that are unlike you. And there is this fear. And I think that that's also why it's taken such a long time to see representation in general in TV and film and in the entertainment industry, because we're used to one look, one type of person. But do you think that now there is a change even when it comes to religious beliefs in different cultures in TV and film? Because I know we're seeing more minorities and diversity as far as looks go, but I'm wondering if you're seeing that change as far as religious beliefs.
Slowly but surely. One of the more interesting discussions, case studies we had in my ethics class last fall, one of the students asked permission to talk about Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, and that's a show that's managed to offend the Christians, the Wiccans, and the Satanists. Because
they're hitting everybody.
They went hardcore devil worshipping witches in that. And it was fascinating with her presentation and then her case study and the class, somewhere, well, why should this even exist? It's like, well, there's something called the Constitution, and people have freedom of speech, and people can put on TV shows of what, with very few restrictions, but people don't have to watch them.
Right.
So this is a show that actually proved to be popular. I watched the pilot, not for me, so I didn't go back. But I think one of the fascinating things about the postmodern era in which we live in, Judeo-Christian religion is not privileged, but nobody is. We have to compete on a level playing field with everybody, which include Eastern religions, which include pagans, etc. People who think the Force is a religion, I think that's silly. Come on, it's made up for Star Wars. It was never intended to be a religion. Get over yourself.
Right.
Drew from Eastern principles of Eastern mysticism, but come on, that's not for real religion.
Right.
So I'm a stand-up comic. So why do you think comedy gets a pass when it comes to religion? Like, why do you feel like even comedic writers or TV shows, why do they get a pass in discussing religions in the way they approach it?
Just in terms of making funny?
Yeah.
In terms of making fun of people?
Yeah, and making jokes.
A Christian writer who was part of the Jesus movement in the 60s has a great quote that I sometimes refer to. Sacred cows make great hamburgers. And then there's the fact that we're easy targets. Because when you've got, we were talking about the Chick-fil-A boycott, I'm air quotes. We were talking about that in my ethics class a couple of days ago. And when prominent Christians take a moral stand about something over, I'm sorry, that was kind of stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's chicken sandwiches. And for what I found fascinating to that whole thing, and to make a long story shorter, what I found fascinating to that whole thing is that I went by the Chick-fil-A in Hollywood, and they specifically had a sign up saying, "We are independently owned and operated. We love our LGBT
Right.
few customers."
Yeah.
But for people to jump on bandwagons for stupid stuff,
Don't get Karmel started. Don't get Karmel started.
Oh my God.
They will know us by our love, not the
Right.
fish signs on our car,
Exactly.
not by what we're
Exactly.
boycotting against. They will know us by our love. And Albert Tate, who was my pastor, my teaching pastor at Lake Avenue when I was there, and he's the founding pastor of Fellowship Monrovia. But he had a great quote from a sermon. "I see a whole lot of mega churches, but I don't see a whole lot of mega Christians."
Yeah, it's very true though.
Yeah.
It's very true. And I noticed, at least for me, being, still involved in the church and being a worship leader, that the demographic of people that are straying away from religion as a whole are millennials and zennials. It's the older people that are still holding on to these old theological beliefs that they're trying to kind of trickle down the pyramid and down their family tree, so to speak. And I'm wondering what it would take for that generation to kind of lead them back to some form of religion, or even if they don't identify with a God, what do you think it would take to get them to go back to some sort of belief?
I think one thing that's fascinating is a lot of the non-denominational churches often take pride in the fact that we don't do liturgy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you do. Because
Right.
you don't call it liturgy, but you open with X number of songs, you have a prayer, you have a scripture reading, you have a liturgy, you
Right.
just don't acknowledge it.
Exactly.
But some of the old-fashioned things, like the Apostles' Creed. My wife is an English professor at APU. We met during a faculty seminar. And one of the things that she's shocked to find out, because being a medieval English lit is her specialty, is that she'll talk about the Apostles' Creed with some of her students, and they don't know it. They've never heard it. And it's kind of interesting that these are mainstream churches that these kids came from, but they just haven't been exposed to the rich tradition of what we believe and why.
Well, I think with LA though, like for example, mega churches out here, it's really not even about it being church. It's a trendy place to go.
I was talking about that in class yesterday. I was talking with my screenwriting class that actually a friend's screenwriting class I was covering her. She's out with concussion. But we should not use our media, whether TV or film, to preach at people because this is LA. People don't even go to church to be preached at. They go to see their friends. They go to hear the inspirational message. They go for the free childcare, for the program.
Right.
Jesus' name might actually come up once in a while.
Right.
But yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I think part of the thing when around the time that you were still in school, Malynda, one of your classmates was saying, "When I graduate, I'm not going to go to church." It's like, dude, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because you need church for more. You can do Bible study by yourself.
Yeah.
You can. You might even be able to fellowship with a group of friends who are likewise minded. You can't do discipleship on the fly. Discipleship is something that needs to be done intentionally. It requires discipline. They have the same root. And so, plus, this is a tough industry.
For sure.
When things go wrong, and they will, you're going to need that base of support.
Yeah.
That spiritual support, that spiritual family, people to pray for you, to lift you up, to
The
walk
community.
by
Yeah.
you, the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And if you think you can Lone Ranger it, you're wrong.
Yeah, and I think the past few churches I've been to have all felt like clubs, like a literal club. And there's actually one in LA that used to be a club that is now a church. And
Those are trendy.
right,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
it was booming. The music was great, and I don't remember much of the sermon or anything, but like the feel, I'm like, okay, this is very entertaining.
Yeah.
And there was another one in Orange County I went to, and I'm like, it was a light show. I was like, what is going
Cue the
on here?
gobos.
Right.
The fog and
Yeah,
everything.
fog and laser lights.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
what is this? And I'm like, where is just learning about the Bible and just being taught these basic principles? Why do I need all the fog? Why do I need all this? But then they're catering to people who are in this world, in this media age where you need to be entertained. And they don't understand, like, that's not serving them. Yes, they'll
Right.
come in, they'll be there, and they'll fill seats, but they're not getting anything.
Right.
There's a popular church nearby. I won't name it, but I've had a lot of friends go there over the years, and it seemed like the average life expectancy for attendance for a parishioner there was about give or take 2 to 3 years, because seeker sensitive is one thing, but you gotta feed people.
Yes.
You gotta give them meat. Because
Yeah.
if you're just giving them warm and fuzzies and the spiritual equivalent of Cheetos, they're gonna be hungry for solid food and they're gonna move on.
Absolutely.
Right.
And almost
Absolutely.
everybody I know who went to that church did move on.
Yeah. I think the problem, and I probably know the church you're talking about, but that I've noticed is with churches like that, when they get like a celebrity endorsement, people automatically think, oh, well, this person must align with my beliefs, quote unquote, or they go there, so it must be a good church. So you go there, and it becomes a networking event, basically, because you're not there for any spiritual food or for any like spiritual connection or to actually hear about the teachings of Jesus or whatever religion you're practicing. And I hate that it's become that.
I had the church I go to, Ecclesia Hollywood. We do have a few congregants who are prominent actors and prominent producers, etc. And one of the more prominent actors I've known since I was in grad school, because he was in the MA program when I was in the PhD program, and I'm always very careful. I've hit him up to come speak at school a couple of times over the years, but I'm always very careful I don't give out information without their express permission. I don't make, I try to leave them be because they are there for a specific reason. It's not for networking. And I've had people approach me about, oh, can you? It's like, no, I will not put you in touch with so-and-so
Right,
because
right.
that is not, I'm not going to abuse my relationship with them. That's just, ugh.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people want other people to sacrifice their contacts for their own personal gain. Yeah.
I remember when I was fairly new at APU, somebody asked me for my contacts, and I'm like, no. My contacts are my contacts, not yours.
Right.
Yeah.
I will reach out to them on your behalf if I
Right.
think it's something they might be interested in, but no.
Right. I have no problem with connecting people because I think that's what we should do. We should pay it forward if we reach a level of success in some way and we're able to help somebody, absolutely. But to give you somebody else's number and email, absolutely
It's
not.
got to be natural and organic.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
So let me ask you, how do you feel about entertainment in Christianity? Like, for example, every year we have this Harvest Crusade thing, and I know thousands of people who go to it, and I feel like it's a good event. I understand the meaning behind it, but I feel like it's disingenuous to me. And I don't understand. I understand it. I just don't like it. And how do you feel about it? It's that and other types of entertainment in Christianity.
I went to a Promise Keepers rally shortly after I moved to LA with some guys from my men's group. And it was interesting. One of them asked me point blank, why are the black preachers so much better than the white preachers? I just laughed. But the moment that kind of freaked me out was the racial reconciliation section. Because all these white guys I don't know are coming up, giving me a hug and
Oh, my
apologizing. And my buddy Scott Popjas, he was a few years ahead of me in grad school, and we became good friends when I moved here because he kind of helped me orient. I was in men's group with him and sang at his wedding, etc. But I talked to him about it later on, and I said, what am I supposed to think? That you're acting, that a lot of white guys are acting civil and polite, but deep down inside they're just honky crackers? And he thought that was funny, so it became a running gag for us. But there's some truth to that. And the thing is, the current occupant of the White House, we found out that there are a lot of people who have incredibly racist views.
Absolutely.
By the things they've said, by the things they've posted. Even when Obama was elected, I had a student I had directed in this show post some incredibly racist things on Facebook. It's like, wow. So
Yeah.
I would rather know that you're, underneath that veneer, you're actually wearing a virtual hood versus not know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, to quote from John, the beginning of John, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it. I mean, when the light exposes racism, all kind of isms. I'd rather know than not know.
100%.
And I think that that's been a rude awakening and a shock for a lot of people. It's like, why are you? I mean, the xenophobia, the sexism, the whole. It's just
Every ism and
infuriating.
phobia, yeah.
Every ism
Yeah.
you can think of,
Yeah.
and people who claim
To be
who
Christians.
claim the cross of Christ
Yeah.
as their banner, and yet, dude, did you read the Bible?
Yeah.
There is no slave, there is no Jew, no Greek, no slave nor free. It's like everybody's equal in God's eyes, and everybody's our neighbor, which is the lesson of the Good Samaritan. And it's kind of frustrating. I'm just glad that nobody I'm extremely close to is like that.
Sure.
Right. And that's another reason why a lot of people have walked away from that specific religion, is because there's a group of people that have essentially hijacked it for their bigotry. And it's a shame that for people, and we're all flawed or nobody's perfect, obviously, but the people that I feel do practice Christianity the way that Christ intended for us to do it, they have to defend their beliefs because this other group of people have made Christianity look like such a horrible thing.
Just
Do you
like
feel that way?
there was a couple in one of the southern states. I want to say it's Alabama. That was they were turned down for the wedding venue they wanted because
The interracial couple.
The interracial couple, and then the bride to be basically sat this person down with the Bible and asked, "Show me where the Bible forbids this," and it doesn't, because my wife is Anglo. And it's just, but historically, people have used the Bible to justify all kinds of racism, sexism, homophobia.
Absolutely.
I mean, just all kinds of slavery. That's the worst. I mean, that's why the Southern Baptist became its own denomination, because they wanted to keep their slaves, and they split off.
It's very true. It's terrible.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
It's I don't understand. Like, I had a discussion about the Bible with a friend of mine, and just how we're taught the Bible versus what the Bible actually says.
Yes.
It's so intriguing to me. Like,
Yes.
I was talking to him about what verse was it? I think it was creation. And everyone always talks about Adam and Eve and being the first people. I'm like, it doesn't really say they were the first people. It's just the first mention of people's names. So the actual creation story is in Genesis. But it looks like, what are you talking about? It says Genesis chapter 1:26 talks about man and woman being created. Adam and Eve talked about in chapter 2. And he looked at me with this look like, has it always been written that way? I'm like, yeah, it's never been written any other way. He's like, but why are we taught that way? I said, I don't know, but you can literally read it for yourself. And it honestly says that there was no man that tilled the ground, and that's when they created Adam. So you want to look at maybe the first farmer was Adam, but it doesn't say he was the first person. So then you start thinking about certain things as always as a kid, like where did Cain get his wife and stuff like that. Well, it makes sense if they're not the first people. This is the first story. It all begins to make sense, but we're taught differently. And it's just weird when you look at how that becomes now the same thing in cinema, where they keep, appropriating the same story. It's hard to get out of that indoctrination, but it's honestly right there. You can read it for yourself. I just don't know why we don't get to the point where we actually do the reading on our own.
Well, there's also so many different versions of the Bible.
Yes.
It keeps changing over time that makes you question, okay, well, what is this? Because it's different in King James, New International, and like however
With the different translations.
Yeah, all of that.
And unless you have can read Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic, you're not getting the real thing.
The real thing, yeah.
You're depending on somebody to translate it accurately for you.
Absolutely.
Which they rarely do. So.
Well, yeah, that's not going to happen, and maybe not in our lifetime at least.
No.
So I want to ask you: do you think that people in the entertainment industry that are vocal about their religion and their beliefs, do you think it cripples them in any way?
I think it's stupid for them to be. I mean, when I was on JAG, they knew my background because my dad was a career naval chaplain. In fact, season 8, I think it was, or one of the later seasons when I was consulting for them, they actually, my former boss calls me up, he's back as head writer, and says, tell me about your dad. Because they created a character based on my dad and a character loosely based on me because his dad was a fictitious version of my dad. And what's funny is Scott Lawrence, the actor who played him, I met at the rap party that year and said, hey, you play me. And I explained. It's like, thank you. He became a serious lead by the end of the end of the show.
That's awesome.
But people just don't know. And here's the thing. Do a great job. Do an amazing job. And then if somebody asks you what you believe, feel free to share them. But the people who go in saying, I'm a Christian and I'm awesome and my God is awesome,
Right.
they're going to be watching you to see if your walk matches your talk.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you've blown your witness. And if you're a terrible worker, you've blown your witness. And if you're annoying, you've blown your witness. I mean,
All true.
I tell all my students, do an amazing job no matter what. I was a writer's PA on on the Family Channel sitcom, which meant lunch boy, copy boy, script delivery boy, and as a caveat, as part of my job, if I wasn't otherwise tasked, I could sit in on the writers' room, and if I earned their trust, the deal was I could suggest story ideas, and ultimately that led to my first script sale.
Okay.
Which was a great experience. But there were people who think that, they were interns who had a similar job as me, and they were naked in their ambition of what they do. Focus on what you're doing now, not where you want to go.
Yeah.
Because if you're great at your job, they'll ask you, what do you want to do eventually? But if your sole purpose is, I want to use this as a stepping stone to get somewhere else, focus on the here and now. And I've had students say to me, I don't want to be a PA. It's like, no, you need to be a PA.
You have to start
I
there.
was a 30-something-year-old PA and a doctoral candidate at the same time. I never want to hear some 20-year-old, college student tell me I never want to be a PA. You have to pay your dues.
Yeah.
Hollywood there are many aspects of Hollywood. It's a meritocracy. You work your way up the food chain.
Absolutely. Well, but it's funny you say that because I feel like nowadays with like social media and everything, there's this perception that you don't have to. That you don't have to pay your dues. That you don't have to work your way up because you can get instant fame, or you can do YouTube, or you can be an Instagram star. People don't think that they have to work up to anything anymore.
But at the end of the day, you still have to have the goods.
For sure.
And that's the problem. These the people who go on reality shows to become famous, but they don't have anything to back that up.
Nothing of substance.
They don't have it. They don't have any skills. They don't have any talent.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna go there.
Let me ask you another question, because you mentioned about being vocal about your beliefs and that not being a good thing. Why is there this almost, if you're an LGBT or Q and you scream that out, you're championed. But if you are a Christian, Mormon, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, that's not. Like, why would you have that weird discrepancy where my religion is one thing I should be quiet about, but my sexual preference I should be speaking loudly about.
I think a lot of people are pretty quiet about their sexual preferences. I mean, really, it's nobody's business, and sometimes people want to get it out there just so it's just in case you're wondering. But it's got nothing to do with the quality of the work you're doing.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's trumpeting "I'm this" or "I'm that," but doesn't have the work ethic, doesn't have the skill, doesn't have the talent to back it up, is portraying themselves in a poor light. It's interesting because a lot of people will say, why is it that Christians can't, be as out and vocal about their beliefs as LGBT? Well, LGBTQ is a community that has historically been discriminated against, whereas Christians historically have been the ones discriminating against others.
Right.
So it's a false equivalency. And every time I hear about people complaining about persecution or I've been whitelisted no, dude, the reason you're not working is you're not very good.
Right.
And if you look people who are being persecuted, other countries, there are actually Christians being executed.
Yeah.
You're being inconvenienced. Oh, poor baby.
Right.
No, that's not persecution.
There is this attitude, and I always joke, and I'm like, you want to be oppressed so bad, and I don't know why. There's this need for people that want to feel oppressed, so they always have to make it about them. So I've noticed that very much so.
I think part of the thing is I actually had some friends from grad school, both attractive blonde Anglo women, tell me in my face that I'd never experienced prejudice or racism before. And I'm like, you must be kidding. Really? Really? Yeah, you don't get to say that.
At all. We're born into it, just being black. Like, we can't avoid it.
Well, when I Touched by an Angel was shot in Utah.
Oh.
Because it's a right to work state.
Okay.
But Valerie O'Brien, whose son Austin O'Brien was one of our students at APU and is a photographer now
Oh, cool.
in I think Chicago area, and he's really good at it.
Great.
Saw him at a wedding a few years back. But Valerie Austin was on the spinoff Promised Land. He and his mom rented the other half of the duplex my roommates and I had. But we were shopping once, and she was horrified. In Utah, you've got the two options when people of color go shopping. Two options: either you are completely ignored, or they've got a squad on you, like you are going to shoplift something.
Yes.
And she was mortified. I think she actually, because Valerie is very brash, I think she said something to the clerk, and I'm like, girl, that's my life. I'm
Right.
used to that.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it was amplified a little bit because of Utah, but we're used to that.
For sure.
But I think
For
it was
sure.
the first time she had seen it.
Wow.
Well, of course,
personally.
and that's the thing when specifically white people see it happen to friends that are people of color. I'm like, we weren't lying about this.
No.
I'm telling you, this happens all the time, and so the shock factor makes me laugh because I'm like, this is not
This
a
is
new
not new.
thing. This is not a new thing.
And when to speak about a similar thing with gender, when I was at the Naval Academy, women were still fairly new there. I graduated in '85. The first women graduated in '80, so they were still fairly new. There were a lot of people who didn't want them to be there, professors included, senior officers, midshipmen themselves. And I had a lot of great female classmates. I was friends with many of them. And we had our reunion. Our 30th reunion was a few years back. It's time for 35 almost. But my best friend from the academy, Anglo, Paul, and several of the women would say, "Hey, good to see you. You were some of the good ones."
Oh, wow.
And I had to, after it happened like the second
man.
or third time, I had to explain to him because being in a place of privilege, being a white dude, he didn't understand
Right.
being an ethnic minority. I
Right.
saw the stuff. What was sad is some of the stuff that my classmates shared with me that happened. I was still horrified because I knew there was bad stuff going on, but I didn't know about upperclassmen coming in the room, closing the door, and expecting sex. It's like, no, that's not. I mean, but it's changed a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot. Hallelujah. Praise God.
Finally.
Well, before we come to a close, I want to ask you one thing. Since you said research is kind of something you're really, really good at, having had a PhD, how would you recommend people researching and learning about other religions and cultures just for their everyday life?
Oh, gee whiz. Call if it's for Islam, call a mosque and ask if they have a public information officer and if you could sit down and talk to them. For Judaism, call a temple or visit one, talk to the rabbi or somebody they recommend. I directed a play at APU called Parade. It's a musical drama, not a comedy at all, a musical drama about anti-Semitism. And one of my dear friend Larry Moskowitz I met on JAG, I went to a lunch and learn at his temple in Glendale. And then his rabbi, I contacted his rabbi, and he said, "Oh, here's a good person that would be fantastic to come talk to your cast about anti-Semitism." It was about the Leo Frank case, a celebrated case where basically this Jewish guy was lynched because he was accused wrongfully of murdering a white girl, and the star witness against him was the black janitor, who historically is the most likely culprit. And that's how bad it was in Atlanta at that point in time. They believed the word of a black man over a Jewish man because that's how hated Jews were in the South.
Wow.
But she spent about an hour and a half with the cast and just explained things about Judaism, things about anti-Semitism, and it was very eye-opening for them. But that's the thing. The Writers Guild magazine used to have a list of phone numbers in the back, but still, just call a temple, a mosque, a Catholic church, a Protestant church, and ask.
Being a Christian, I know for me growing up, I was always taught not to research other religions.
What?
Like that was like, the devil. We don't read the Quran, we don't look the Vedas, we don't touch any other religions because they're evil. So how do you feel about Christians researching other religions?
I don't think we have. If we're secure in our faith, we have nothing to fear.
Amen to that.
I mean, I remember being told we shouldn't. Mormons aren't Christians, therefore we shouldn't talk to them. I have some friends who are very dear friends who are Mormons. We just don't talk about religion.
Sure.
It's just let's focus on the things we have in common, not the things that we disagree on.
Yeah.
And that goes. Look at the Protestant denominations. It's like the infant baptism versus full immersion when they can make a conscious decision.
Yeah, right. yeah.
Let's not major on the minors. Let's focus on the similarities, not the differences. And one thing, all the monotheistic religions have the first 5 books of the Bible in common, and then afterwards they start to diverge.
Right.
But we still have a strong moral basis to what we believe is the cosmology of the universe. The fact that there is a creator God, the fact that there are absolutes, the fact that there is a hereafter, etc. But yeah, we shouldn't have to fear other religions.
I agree.
I love that.
Yeah.
Perfect love casts out all fear.
Right?
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much for joining
Thanks
us,
for having
Tom.
me. It was
Yes,
went by really quickly.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
it
know it did. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, comment, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we will talk to you next week.
Peace.
Bye.
And this episode of We Need to Talk is brought to you by Black Brew, the darkest, richest, boldest coffee anywhere.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at We Need to Talk the Podcast and Twitter at _We Need to Talk _.